Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you're located. I'm Michael Adenovich, a solutions architect for Cireson, and I'll be your host for today's session on maximizing your Service Manager and Cireson investment, or further defined as Service Manager and Cireson Health Check. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's session. And, I'm going to try to make it as valuable as possible, really make certain that you get the most out of this time today. Not only talk about things that are indicators of requiring a health check, whether it be for Service Manager or for Cireson, but also to provide expert tips that you can take away and actually leverage in your environment. Or maybe your customer's environment. So with that said, let's go ahead and begin. Quick agenda. Go over some quick housekeeping real quick. This is a non-interactive webinar. However, do feel free to post any questions that you have in the GoToMeeting question panel. I think that's on the right-hand side of your screen. And at the end of the session, I'll go and review those questions. If there's questions that I'm unable to answer, I'll follow up via email. Also, at the end of this webinar, there is a survey. I would appreciate if everyone can complete the survey. I made the survey pretty straightforward and simple. It's only 5 questions, yes, no type questions. I promise no essays that you'll need to complete. It'll probably take you like 5 seconds to fill out. Again, I'd appreciate it if you can complete that. And then also today's session will be recorded, and you can view this at any time. Another thing that I want to point out is that today's webinar is not canned, if you would, and one-sided, meaning I'm going to be the only participant here today. I do have a number of polls and questions that I'll be using throughout the webinar today. They're just going to be looking for your response. These responses are anonymous. So feel free to answer honestly. There's no way for me to track this. And your input and feedback would be greatly appreciated. And you're probably wondering now, is this webinar trying to sell me a health check or teach me how to do something or provide a health check on my own? To be honest with you, the answer is both. Really, I want to highlight the main areas of performance bottlenecks, at least that our Cireson consultants have seen out in the field, and really want to provide expert advice, even some scripts that you can run in your environment. And I'll talk about those scripts and provide the links to those scripts at the end of the session. Really want you to take advantage of this. And like I say, you could take these tips and leverage them in your environment to improve performance. If you're not comfortable with some of the more complicated aspects of the health check, and making certain that everything is meeting best practices and so forth, feel free to reach out to the Cireson partner community. We have great partners that have skills to assist in that process, or you could also leverage Cireson consulting services to assist in that process as well. So there's 3 main points that we want to cover today, and I'll go through these really quickly, and that is, do I need a health check? Secondly, understanding the key benefits of a health check, as well as conclusions, next steps, and the Q&A that I mentioned earlier. So with that said, I think we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our first poll. Again, I'd appreciate everyone's participation in this. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. I'd appreciate everyone's feedback on this. And hopefully everyone can see what I have up on the screen there. We've got 22% participation. If others could participate, that'd be great. We'll give it a little more time for people to participate in the poll. That would be wonderful. We're getting there. We've got 33% so far. If we can get a few more, that would be fantastic. Again, remember, this poll is anonymous. There's no way for me to track the information. So if you could complete that, I would greatly appreciate it. And we're still, looks like we're not going to get any more participation. Well, we've got 33%, which is not too bad. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close the poll. And we have, actually, of the participants that voted, 100% feel that they do need a health check. Hopefully everyone can see the results on the screen there. I'm going to share the results. So we've got 33% that voted, and of those, they all feel that they need a health check. Okay, interesting. Oh, and by the way, with these polls, I have a bad habit of sometimes not removing the results, and I move on. If I do that, please put something in the chat window so that I can see, and I'll make certain to hide that poll results. So moving on, we're going to go ahead and actually, I have another poll for you. And I'm going to launch this. Again, I'd appreciate everyone's participation. And here, what I'd like to know is, what is the average amount of time it takes to open an incident or work item within the out-of-the-box console in your environment? So again, appreciate everyone's participation. It is anonymous again, so if you can answer, that would be great. So we're at 22%. Yeah, what we're looking for is, it's just how long it takes to open up a work item in your environment. So we're at 30%. We'll give it another minute here. Allow everyone to vote. 67% are less than 5 seconds. That's actually not too bad. We're getting some coming in at 11 to 20 seconds. Again, if everyone can vote, I would greatly appreciate it. Remember, again, it's what's the time it takes to open up a work item in your environment using the out-of-the-box console. We're at 40%. We'll give it about another 20 seconds, and then we'll go ahead and I'll close the poll. Yeah, we're getting there. We're at 50%. Not too bad. Again, I appreciate everyone's participation. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this poll out. And now I'm going to go ahead and share the results out here. As you can see, not too bad. 60% are less than 5 seconds. Every once in a while, we get someone who's less than a second or two, which is really impressive. We've got 20% at 6 to 10 seconds. And 20% at 11 to, or I'm sorry, 6 to 10, and then 11 to 20 seconds there. No one is more than 21 seconds. You'd be amazed. Some clients have actually responded that they're higher than 21 seconds to open up a work item. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close the poll out here. Hopefully everyone can now see the screen again. Alrighty. Based on the poll, if you're 5 seconds or less, you're in fairly decent shape. More than likely you don't need a health check. However, if you're 6 to 10 seconds to load or higher, you could definitely do better. If you're higher than 10 seconds, you definitely need a health check. And a health check can really help with that. One of the things that you want to keep in mind is that we don't want to just look at the load time of work items to determine whether you need a health check or not. There's a number of other key indicators that you want to look at. Some of those being the work item views and how long do those take to load. A lot of times when views are set up, they're set up incorrectly, where they're using actually the advanced loads versus combination classes. In doing so, that adds additional time to the view loads. Not only that, but it's also affecting the overall performance of the solution when you set up the views that way. With the advanced loads, when you set that, when you use that to create your views, what that's doing is that is pulling in a lot of unnecessary data, even though it's not even displayed within the view. It's just the nature of the advanced load there. So when you're selecting your type projection, if you need to scope it at least to, if you can get away with it, the combination class. That'll improve the load time of the view and not affect performance for your other users. Other items that you want to look at are your workflows. Are they running longer than normal, or are they timing out? There are instances of, well, I guess the question is, do you as administrators or partners working with your customers check on a frequent basis the status of your workflows? Are they taking longer than normal? Some of them even timing out. A lot of times administrators don't even check their workflows to make certain that they're running properly. Are your IT analysts complaining of performance? Another indicator. That's actually one of the big indicators as well. Are they complaining of performance? Are they unhappy? That's also another indication that you may want to look at how the system is tuned. And do you need to have a health check on it? End users' perspective, are they satisfied with the performance, as well as the service catalog that you've created? Is that meeting their needs and requirements? So those are definitely things that you want to look at to determine whether you need to maybe optimize your environment. But there's also process inefficiencies. So when you're looking at your system, you want to look at it from two perspectives. First being the technical aspect from a performance perspective, which we just briefly covered. The other piece is process inefficiency. And the process inefficiencies is where you have your ITSM and ITAM processes. And you basically are configuring the system based on your processes. Now, maybe at the time when you configured the solution, however many years or months you've been using the solution, the business requirements change, whether it be just through organic growth, acquisitions, business changes and requirements. A lot of times your processes change. When those processes change, was the system changed to accommodate those new processes that are now within your within IT? So those are things that we're going to talk about as well. We want to make certain that those processes are properly mapped efficiently. Because if they're incorrectly set, that'll also cause performance. So we really need to look at it from two perspectives, as well as it'll throw off your KPI data or key performance indicators if you're not using the process modules correctly or configured properly. What I mean by that is there are some customers that their process previously was everything went into incidents. Whether it was a service request, change request, it was all, the only way to track it was they just created a ticket. They never set up the different process modules. In that situation, again, that could affect performance, but more importantly, you're never going to be able to get proper reports to track how IT is doing. And if you don't have that accurate data, you're never going to be able to improve what we call the ITIL continual service improvement process to really improve those efficiencies there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump in more from a technical perspective and talk about things you want to look at from a technical perspective, and then I'll briefly touch on the process health check, if you would, near the end there. So from a technical perspective, we want to look at the Service Manager environment, and we want to look at the installation from an operating system perspective. Want to look at the management servers, the data warehouse servers, service management servers. Are they properly patched? Are they up to date with the appropriate requirements, especially from a performance perspective, because the patches that Microsoft puts out, not only from a service manager but an OS perspective, can improve performance as well. So those are some of the things that you want to look at there. Additionally, you want to look at the surrounding infrastructure environment as it relates to your solution. Backups and maintenance windows being one of them. Not only, whether you're snapshotting your VMs or backing up certain things such as your SQL database. Couple of things there from a SQL perspective. When you install Service Manager, the database natively goes in a full recovery mode. And with full recovery mode, that means that your transaction logs are growing quite a bit. And if your SQL backup solution that's backing up that database is not set properly, those logs sometimes do not get truncated, meaning they grow and grow and grow. Two things with that. First, it's going to affect performance. And then secondly, you could run out of disk space on your SQL server. So you want to make certain that you're truncating your logs for your backups, as well as what's your maintenance window for doing this backup? Are these during production hours, non-production hours? Because it dogs the system when the SQL database is being backed up. So, it sounds like very simple, but there's a lot of times these windows and maintenance processes are not set up properly, and you definitely want to look at those. Some of the other items are the network configurations, duplexing, firewall settings, so forth and so on. So those are things that you definitely want to look at there. And if we move forward from a high availability DR perspective, or business continuity plan as some firms call it, we want to look at the secondary, or we want to look at the overall solution from a redundancy perspective. A lot of times clients have created their own applications to enhance the overall solution. Other times they leverage third-party solutions. And there's a certain process that needs to transpire when you are installing those. A lot of times the instructions indicate that you need to install this on the primary management server or workflow server and so forth. A lot of times from a failover perspective, when firms do kick over, their secondary and tertiary management servers are missing application DLLs, configurations, and so forth. These are things that you want to look at. So now you're scrambling in a failover or high availability perspective because your overall solution is not functioning as designed. So when you're installing applications, you also want to install the appropriate DLLs and so forth on your secondary and tertiary management servers. Otherwise, in a failover situation, you're not going to fail over properly. You're going to be missing a lot of functionality there. Management pack best practices. A lot of times, firms will either not store their configurations properly. They're storing them in the out-of-the-box management packs that come with the solution. The bad thing about that is whenever there's updates to the solution, you could be losing all of your configurations because those management packs are wiped out during the upgrade process. So we really want to work with you to make certain that you're creating management packs properly, storing your configurations in there. But are you also exporting and backing those management packs up? I've seen situations before where clients have encountered a major disaster. They tried to recover from their backup database, but the database was corrupt. When they went to, so they just, no big deal, they just rebuild the Service Manager environment. But unfortunately, they had no management packs to restore all of their configurations and customizations. They didn't have a process in place to export their custom management packs out on a regular basis and then back those up to tape. So those are things that you definitely want to consider. And as part of that backup process, when you installed Service Manager or your partner or whomever you leveraged, that setup has encryption keys during the setup process. Those keys are critical and need to be backed up as well. So you're going to want to maintain all of that. You want to make certain that you have those backed up and you're following best practices from a management pack perspective and with your secondary, tertiary management servers. Want to make certain that they are set up properly there. So yeah, a little expert advice. Yeah, sleep well advice. Yeah, I'll let everybody read that and I'll move forward. Okay, I think everyone's done with that expert advice. So from a role sizing perspective, here you want to configure the overall solution for an optimal performance and scale. So you want to look at the configurations that help you with the role sizing and the placement. One of the things that you really want to look at are the number of analysts that you have, the work items that you acquire per month, number of configuration items in the database, concurrent browser sessions, as well as what your DR requirements and your failover requirements. Here is where you want to make certain that the architecture, the overall solution, meets not only all of your requirements from an analyst perspective, an end user perspective, a failover perspective. Do you have your management server strategically placed globally to improve performance for your users and analysts across the globe? The database architecture. Here you want to really evaluate. Now, maybe earlier on when it was originally implemented, everything was architected properly. But again, business changes. Maybe there's additional staff. You picked on another company. So you may want to evaluate that to make certain that it's architected properly. Again, you could leverage a partner, Cireson Consulting. There's plenty of documentation out on Microsoft's site to help you to size and scale the environment properly. But in order to do that, again, you want to look at all of these items here, as well as your failover and business continuity plan to make certain that it's architected properly here. So from a database configuration perspective, you know, the database is really key here, because this is, think of it as your long-term memory, and it's housing all of the data for long periods of time. So you want to make certain that this is healthy and running efficiently. So here we really want to look at the Service Manager and database or data warehouse databases. Look at the configurations on the data retention, the grooming of your ECLs. That's really key, and I could talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. Your SQL configuration, that's really key to make certain that it's properly sized, it's placed in the appropriate location, you're getting the proper IOs, and you have the best practice configurations. And yes, we're talking memories, the CPUs allocated. There's a lot of SQL configurations that you can do to fine-tune the overall solution. But one of the big things that's really important is the fact that the temp database only is written by one CPU at a time. So if you have multiple CPUs and cores allocated to your SQL server, however, you're still only leveraging a single temp database, that's going to create a bottleneck for you. In addition to the IOs, but the temp DB. So from a best practices perspective, what you really want to do is add multiple temp DBs, and I believe you could have up to 8 temp DBs. It might be even a little bit higher. If you only have 4 CPUs, then you're going to only want 4 temp databases created. So again, something to look at. If you're not comfortable with that, you may have a SQL expert within your organization that could assist with that process. Or again, you can leverage a partner or Cireson Consulting Services to also look on how to improve that configuration as well. So from a workflow perspective, workflows are the heart of this system, and as all the participants using Service Manager are well aware, and again, you need to make certain that those are healthy and running efficient. So from a service management or manager perspective, really want to dive into the performance of each individual workflow, make certain that they are working properly, and also to best practices, especially when it comes to subscriptions, queues, and groups. Subscriptions, those can be difficult to manage, especially if you have quite a few subscriptions. You know, it's nice to keep it as trim as possible, because that's going to one, make the setup easier, but also eliminate a lot of long-term administration. Queues and groups, as I mentioned, that's really key, because if you set up queues and groups, which a lot of firms do, are they set up properly? And are they set up where they're using the least scope, where it's not affecting performance? Do you have an unruly amount of queues and groups? Because that really has a drag on the performance of the solution and really affects performance there. So you want to look to see if you have too many. Are your queues and your groups set up properly? Are your email notifications set up properly as well? So from a Cireson application perspective, we want to again look at all the workflows within the individual Cireson applications, such as the service management streams and all the apps associated with that stream, as well as the asset management stream, along with the other apps. And I'm not going to go through each of those individual apps. I think that that would just take up too much time. So from a report and data warehouse perspective, again, it's more workflows because the reporting and data warehouse servers are configured with a lot of workflows there. So we want to look, I guess it's really, you know, the reports that you're running require these workflows. So you really want to make certain that they're running properly. And are they relevant with the information? So again, we're going to focus on the data warehouse and the reporting infrastructure. So you really want to look for inconsistent job performance as well as job failures. And if there are any, you know, again, the partner, Cireson, can help, or there's plenty of information out there on the internet that'll help with troubleshooting those particular issues that you may be encountering from a data warehouse perspective. So from a connector health perspective, you know, we really want to look to see if Service Manager is communicating properly and providing you with the data that is truly needed. So we really want to review that connector framework. Look for any issues with the configurations. Are they meeting best practices? Again, we're going to look for inefficient or inaccurate data or any performance issues. Now, some of the things that you want to look at here. So from a connector perspective, one, aside from the fact that are the connectors actually communicating properly, but when you set up the connector, are you using syncing null values? By default, when you set up the connectors, the null box is checked. Well, to be honest with you, you really don't want to synchronize null values because that's just adding to the synchronization time, and during that time it's also affecting performance of the solution. So you're going to want to look at each of your connectors to make certain that you're not synchronizing null values. That will bring down your synchronization time. That's one thing that you want to look at. Another thing that you want to look at is that with your Active Directory connector, do you have the scope kind of narrowed down? And what I mean by that is a lot of times when you set up the connector, people take the easy approach and just say, yeah, just go ahead and sync everything from Active Directory. So it'll take users, printers, computers, and so forth. But when you select that option, that also takes all the disabled users and a lot of other unnecessary data. Again, adding additional synchronization time and performance degradation to the overall solution. So in that situation, you can create another connector, or the recommendation to that is to create a connector that's only going to pull in the information that you need. So whether it be just active AD users, maybe you don't need computers and printers because you're going to pull the computer data from Configuration Manager because it's by far much more accurate versus the AD connector. Or if you have a large AD environment where you have maybe over 10,000 objects, you probably don't want to create one connector to do that. You probably want to break that up into multiple connectors, pointing them to different OUs, and then spreading the synchronization time evenly. So again, it's not affecting production. So those are some of the things that you definitely want to look at. If you're not doing this, you know, aside from the performance and pulling in unnecessary or inaccurate data, what this is also doing, if not set properly, is bloating your database because it's populating data that you're never going to use or it's inaccurate. So now you're growing your Service Manager database, again affecting performance. So these are things that you truly want to look at and items that you want to avoid there. So from a security best practices perspective, Here you're going to want to look at the service accounts, the user roles, and are those scoped properly. You know, one of the things we're talking about, the management pack best practices, backing those up. One thing to keep in mind is that when you're backing up your management packs, that doesn't maintain any of your security roles, security accounts, and things of that nature. So one thing to definitely keep in mind is you're going to want to document that, the security role. Even though, yes, you're doing a backup of your database, keep your fingers crossed. Let's hope that that's accurate in the event that you need to restore. But if it's not, at least you have it documented. Now, at the end of this session, I have a script that I'll provide a link for you to access that will scour the system and capture all of your configurations and document it for you, including the security setup there. So, and we'll be getting to that shortly. So definitely take advantage of that script to capture your configurations and your security settings. Yeah, a little bit of expert advice there. I'll let everyone read that. I think everyone's good, so let's go ahead and move on. So from a Cireson application perspective, you know, we've talked a lot about Service Manager, a little bit about the Cireson applications as well. But here you're going to want to look at the configurations of, again, each of the Cireson applications and make certain that they are meeting best practices, not only from an installation perspective, but also a customization and a configuration perspective. If they are not set up properly, it's going to definitely impact your upgradability. So when you upgrade to the latest or the next release of the product to take advantage of bug fixes or feature enhancements, if best practices are not followed, you're going to lose your configurations and customizations. Cireson has a number of videos out on Vimeo as well as our support site walking you through and explaining the best practices. If this is not something that, you know, hey, you just don't have the time to review that, again, you can leverage the Cireson partner community as well as Cireson Consulting to assist in that process as well. So moving on here, this is a poll check. I want to see if everyone's awake still. So I'm gonna display another poll here. So if you give me a moment, I'll go ahead and run this poll. And here, I launched it. Wonderful. Here I'd like to know if you could say with 100% confidence that your ITSM and ITAM processes align to your service management and asset management configuration. Again, it kind of goes back to that that slide that from a health check perspective, we need to look at not only the technical perspective, but as well as the process perspective. This is anonymous. Right now we're at 33% participation. If I can get a little more, that would be great. I'm going to keep the poll open for a little bit. Just so that everyone knows, right now we're at 33% participation, and of those participants, the response is all no. The process is, or the configuration is not aligned to the process. So that's something that we're definitely going to want to look at there. We're at 50%. I'll leave the poll open for about another 30 seconds. And again, I appreciate everyone's participation in here. We'll leave it open for about another 10 seconds. And again, if I leave the poll results up on the screen, just send me a message in the chat. I'll make certain to close that. Again, it's a bad habit, so I think we're good. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close the poll out. Again, I appreciate everyone's participation. We did get about 50% participation, and of those that participated, 83% feel that their process or configuration is not aligned to their process. The remainder, not certain. And I appreciate everyone's participation and honest response on that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hide this poll here, and I think we're in good shape. We're going to go ahead and move on and talk about the process here. And I promise you, I don't have many more slides, so we're nearing the end here. So from a process perspective, this is you know, like I say, we're going to kind of break this up from a technical perspective to a process perspective. You know, so as part of a health check, it's really imperative that you also look at your process, whether you're doing this on your own within your organization, working with a partner, Cireson, it doesn't matter. You definitely want to look at the processes here. And you want to start with your documentation. Do you have documentation outlining what your processes are? Is that documentation up to date? If not, let's get it up to date. If you don't have documentation or it's not up to date, obviously you're going to want to work with the stakeholders and the process owners to review that process. Make certain that that process is meeting the current business goals and objectives, not only for today, but also for tomorrow. You want to find out also what their reporting requirements are. That's going to be a key. That's going to be key as well. It's not only the process, but how do you want to make certain that you're measuring how well IT is doing. So you want to find out what reports they need in order to determine success. In order for those reports to be successful, we need to have the appropriate SLAs set up, the appropriate response times or configurations within each of the process modules. So we need to understand what the processes are and what the reports are needed to measure success on how well you're delivering those processes. So again, it's involving looking at the existing documentation, working with the stakeholders and the process owners to determine the process as well as the reporting requirements. Once you understand that, now we're still on the process analysis here. Once you understand that, have this information, and we want to take it to the next step here of now we have all the information, we know the processes that we need. Now let's look to see where how the system is configured today. Is that meeting our process? Let's make certain that our workflows are set up to meet those processes. Are the SLAs set up? If we have all these SLAs or reporting requirements, we need these SLAs set up. Are those SLAs set up in the environment? So again, this is something that you as an organization want to do. It's a two-part process. If this is not something that you're comfortable with or feel that you have the time, again, leverage the partner or Cireson to assist with that process. Now, once you have this information, this is really going to improve your KPI reporting, which in turn is going to provide information for IT to improve their services, or if you want to, I can get technical and say the ITIL continual service improvement process for any of those participants following actual ITIL processes. And one of the things also from a KPI perspective, and I touched upon this before, are you using the process modules properly? Where, you know, hey, are you lumping Instead of breaking down the process modules properly with incident service, problem management, and change management, are you lumping everything into a single process module or two process modules? Again, throwing off your reporting key performance indicators. So once you have captured all this information, you really want to now realign your processes and make certain that the system is configured now to map to those processes. And one thing to keep in mind, and I've seen this before with other customers, when you're reconfiguring the solution to meet your processes, don't overcomplicate the configuration. There's sometimes where the processes that you may have in place may not be really 100% configurable within the actual solution. So a lot of times clients in that situation that I have seen is, well, let's customize the solution. Well, if you continue to do that, again, you could inadvertently be affecting performance in order to meet a particular process. In some situations, it's unavoidable, but your first line of defense is, how can we keep our solution simple, running optimal, reduce the long-term administrative nightmare with customizations, just tons of customizations. Maybe you may want to redefine the process a little bit in order for the process to work with the solution. That, again, like I say, is your first line of defense versus, well, let's customize the solution. So you need to find a good balance there as to what's going to work for you or what's not going to work with for you. And then keep in mind, if you do customize it for some crazy process, I've seen clients spend tens of thousands of dollars with those types of configurations. So again, if you could try to avoid that, I can't stress enough to avoid that like the plague. So I think that's all I really had when it came to the process. I wanted to kind of keep it simple because I know we're nearing getting close to the time limit here. So with that said, I'm going to kind of do a quick summary here. So we've talked about the installation, the environment health. I'm not going to go through each of these. I think everyone can see them here listed here. So just remember, when you're looking to do a health check, two aspects: the technical aspect and the process aspect. You really want to make certain to approach both of those properly, and hopefully the information provided today gave the participants the information needed to do their own health checks. If not, I don't want to sound like a broken record. There's always the partners in Cireson. So as I mentioned, I've got a couple of scripts that I wanted to provide to you. The first script, and hopefully everyone can see that on my screen here. This is a script that one of the Cireson product managers, Chris Ross, you probably know that name well out on the internet. He's written quite a few books and manages some websites as it relates to System Center. He was kind enough to write a management pack, or a script to back up all of the management packs. So I strongly suggest that you leverage that if you're not properly backing up your management packs today. Chris also wrote another script for us here, if I can get it to move on my screen here. This is another script that backs up backs up the configurations, including the security configurations. This will be of benefit to you if you don't have your configurations documented. Even if you're backing up everything, your database, your management packs, your snapshots are being, captured and replicated off to the DR SAN. That's fine and wonderful, but you still need your solution documented. I strongly suggest that take advantage of these scripts that Chris Ross has written, leverage them in your environment. As always, run them in your test environment first, just so that you get a feel for it, even though these are just read-only scripts. There's another script that one of our partners, Catapult, Matthew Doust, had written. It's a management pack cleanup script. One of the things that a lot of persons are unaware of is that with management packs, as time goes on, they become cluttered with references to other management packs, whether they need to access those management packs or not. So what happens is when you're using the solutions or the solution and you're accessing management packs, that management pack, before it can complete its task, has these unnecessary references or what believes to be a dependency, and then goes out to those management packs and requests information that doesn't really need, and then comes back to the other management pack. So my point here is that it takes, it's adding additional time to the overall solution and affecting performance. So Matthew Doust had written a cleanup script that actually cleans up those unnecessary references within the management packs to streamline the management pack. This actually does update the management pack. Download the script, read through it. Again, from a best practices perspective, make certain to run this in your test environment, because this does create a new management pack. Get comfortable with it so you could see how it works and if there's an improvement with the management pack that you just cleaned up. Again, I'm going to leave this on the screen for a little bit. If you guys want to take a screenshot of it, feel free, or write it down. But great information out there. Hopefully everyone's captured that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Cireson does have a newsletter. If you're not signed up for the Cireson newsletter, I strongly suggest that you do sign up. This is great information. It does come out monthly. There is great information on there on new updates, releases that are coming out, as well as technical tips on the Cireson solutions and Service Manager itself. So I strongly advise you to go out to Cireson, sign up for that. You won't be sorry if you receive that information. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and proceed to questions and answers. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask away in the go-to question panel on the right-hand side of the screen. More than happy to answer those questions. So I don't have any questions in there now, but if, like I say, if you guys have questions, please do post them. I think we have a shy group out there, so there's no questions being asked. So I'm going to give everyone their time back. Let's see. Well, we'll give everyone 8 minutes back. Am I going to be at the Innovate conference this year? That's the plan. Yes, I will be at the Innovate conference, and yes, I'll make certain to look for you when I do attend. Hopefully you'll be there as well. So I may be teaching as well. Jim is asking if I'll be teaching at the Innovate conference. I did have a presentation last year. I haven't been assigned or asked to do any presentations or anything as of this time, but I'm pretty confident I will be. So good question. So any other questions that I can answer? All right, I'll give everyone 5 minutes back. And again, thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this session beneficial, and do take advantage. Pete Zerger has a demonstration tomorrow and a talk on ITIL, I believe it is. If you haven't registered for it, I do suggest you go out to Cireson.com and register for that event. And also, yes, when I close the session, there will be a survey. So once the survey is done, or once the session is over and you exit, you will be presented with the survey. So again, I appreciate if everyone can fill that survey out. Again, it's only 5 questions, no essays, it's all multiple choice. I think maybe next time I create a survey, I may do an essay just to be the funny guy. So again, thank you for your time and have yourself a great day.